Next, we're going to try truth tables with 3 statements. So let's use the following statement. I study hard and I ace the final, or I fail the course. So there's a comma here, so that comma is going to remind us that we're going to have parentheses around that group. So I study hard, we'll call that P. Q, we'll actually write P up here. Q is going to be I ace the final. And then we're going to have to use another letter, so we're going to introduce R, or, and then R would be I fail the course. Okay, so the symbolic notation is going to be, we start with parentheses, and then I have I study hard and I ace the final. So I study hard, that's going to be the P, and that's a conjunction. I ace the final, that's Q. And that's in the first set of parentheses. Or, so that's going to be a disjunction, I fail the course, which is R. Because this statement has 3 statements, there's going to be a possibility of 8 different cases. So let's just look at them all here. We have true, 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 false, true, false, true, and so on and so forth. Okay, so every single one of these is a unique combination of true and false for all 3 statements. So the first column that I'm going to work on is going to be P and Q, and is a conjunction. So the rule for conjunction is true only when both are true. So I'm only looking at the first 2 columns, P and Q, at the moment, okay? So for P and Q, if they're both true, then it's true. So they're both true, true. If they're both true, true. If anything in the statement is false, then the whole thing is false. So this one has a false, this one has a false, the next one has a false. In fact, they all have a false in them after the first 2. So I've done the P and Q. Okay. The next thing I need to do is to take that P and Q and do the disjunction with R. So the disjunction with R is an OR. So I am taking this column right here, and I'm doing the disjunction with the R column. Now, the rule for disjunction is false only when both are false. So if they're both false, then the whole thing's false. Otherwise, it's going to be true. So true, true is going to be true. False, true, as long as something's true is true. True, false, something's true. False, false. Okay, because they're both false, the OR will also then be false. True, false, that's true. False, false. Oops, another one where they are both false. True, false, at least something's true. Oh, here's another one, false, false. So in this case, this is going to be my truth table, and we can look at each of the possibilities, and then you'll know if it's going to be true or false, depending on if someone comes along and tells you P is true, Q is true, and R is false, then you know the answer. As a side note, this is neither a tautology or a self-contradiction. The reason this is neither a tautology or self-contradiction is because our end result is sometimes true and sometimes false. Okay, so here's another example. I miss class, comma, if and only if they take attendance or there's a pop quiz. So let's see, I miss class, we'll call that P. If and only if they take attendance, so that's another statement, so they take attendance, we'll make that Q. They take attendance. or there is a pop quiz. We'll call that R. Okay, so the symbolic representation. I miss class, comma. So I miss class, that's P, comma. That comma tells us that the first part is all grouped together and the last part is all grouped together. So the first part only has a P, so grouping P together doesn't make much sense. But that does mean that the last part is going to be grouped together. Now, it also says, I miss class if and only if, so that's biconditional. They take attendance, that's Q, or, that's a disjunction, there's a pop quiz, and that's R. So because the comma breaks up I miss class versus they take attendance and pop quiz, but they take attendance and pop quiz has to be in parentheses. Okay? Now, because we have 3 statements, P, Q, and R, that means we have 8 different possible choices here. So I'm going to have P biconditional with, well, because P is already done for us, I don't really have to do anything for that first part, but I do have to do the parentheses, Q or R, which is a disjunction. And if you remember, the rule for disjunction is false only when both are false. So we're talking about Q and R. So sometimes I like to highlight the columns that I'm actually talking about at the moment. So if both are false, then the whole thing's false. So true, true, that's okay, true. True, false, at least something's true, the whole thing's true. False, true, something is true. False, false, okay, so that's my first one that's false. True, 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 false, that's true. False, true is true, and false, false, whoop. False, false is false, because neither one is true, then the whole thing is false. Okay, I'm going to erase my highlights now. So now I'm going to do the biconditional. P is biconditional with my parentheses. So biconditional. Biconditional is true only when the antecedent and the consequent have the same truth value, because we're going forwards and backwards, right? So we have, let's see, the P column, which is this first column, and then the parentheses column, that's this fourth column here. So we have true if and only true. That is going to be true. True if and only true, they're the same. True and if and only if true is the same. True if and only if false. If one of them's true and one of them's false, the whole thing's false, because the biconditional won't have be going forwards and backwards. If false, then true. Nope, that's false as well. False if and only if true. Nope, that's false. False if and only if true. False. False if and only if false. This one's okay because they're both the same. So in this case, I have true, 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 false, 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 and then true. So because some of the answers are true and some of the answers are false, this is neither a tautology or a self-contradiction, which is probably going to be the case most of the time anyway. Often you're going to have some things that are true and some things that are false. And this concludes our lesson on truth tables.